Thanks to all of you for being here. I'll be sure to bring in each of you to the discussion because I think part of what makes this film so rich is that you're all coming to this film from different perspectives and different places. So I hope my questions along the way will allow us to get into how this company was formed. But Fodhla, I was hoping to start with you since the story began with you. I think what's striking about this film is how our attention is drawn to this mother-son relationship in this very specific community, but there's also this strong, quite urgent moral crisis that frames the whole film, and I think speaks well past, I think, the confines of the village. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how these two things came together for you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming as well. Myself and Shane Crowley, the screenwriter, he and I wanted to tell a story about the world we come from. So I grew up in a very small fishing village in Ireland. Shane grew up 10 minutes down the road from me. He and I have known each other since we were 12 years old. So we knew pretty early on that we wanted to tell the stories about the world we come from. I was at film school and I approached Shane asking would he board this project. I had a very vague idea, and he was like, "Absolutely, I'd love to come over to London and work with you on this." Originally, the idea was for us to explore a fishing community, the trials and tribulations that come with that sort of community. But at the time, he and I were hearing too many stories about women, local women from neighbouring villages, making allegations of sexual assault, and they were essentially excommunicated from their communities. And we found it so dumbfounding that these communities would treat these women in this way. And at the time, Shane and I was at film school and I was learning how to make cinema, how to develop stories. And I just found it, during that period, I was trying to find my voice as a filmmaker, as a female filmmaker, and I felt compelled to use that voice to highlight those stories. So yeah, he and I banded together and started developing the story together, and it took many, many years to find the right partners, and then eventually I saw the Fitz and Ancilia, and then the four of us developed it further together. So this story is very much all of ours. But yeah, that's how it came about.
And so, yeah, I'm hoping you can also add your perspectives on what drew you to this topic and how you envisioned the film would open up a conversation about it.
Yeah, so, at the time, Anna and I had, we finished the Fitz, and then we kind of started talking about becoming a directing team. And so we were writing our own work, and in 2018, I believe it was, this script, God's Creatures, came to us. And we were just, we were in our office in Brooklyn, and we were reading the script, and we were just so kind of taken with, one, Shane Crowley's voice. He has just a very beautiful, poetic style of writing, but he also has a real ability to kind of capture an authenticity within place and people, and we just felt very immersed in the world. But then, we were also struck by the subject matter, as Fodhla described, and specifically this character Aileen, and kind of the choices she makes, and we really wanted to kind of examine her psychology. Why would someone kind of make these choices, and then kind of what does it look like as they're starting to grapple with, did I do the right thing, or possibly did I do something wrong, and kind of what is that evolution?
And, as filmmakers, we're very interested in how trauma reverberates in the body. And this particular story is not just about how one violent act affects a single individual, but about how that violent act tears apart a home, a community, and upends multiple lives. This is about the connectivity of all of us, our responsibility to each other. And it's just, sometimes work comes from within you, sometimes it comes from without, but it was so immediately personal to Celia and I, and it was really actually meeting Fodhla and Shane and just connecting as artists, as humans, and they shared that collaborative spirit with us about that making is about giving and trusting, and it felt like the project for us for now.
Well, since we have two of the actors here, I'm wondering if you can touch on how you assembled this incredible cast of the film. Maybe we can start with Emily in the role of Aileen, who's the heart of the film. It's a complicated role, and so I'm wondering what made you think of Emily for the part.
I mean, since we have been studying cinema, Emily Watson has been part of that vocabulary of work. We have long admired her capacity to embody not just the character, but the essence. She is first and foremost a storyteller. And when we started to think about Aileen, we just kept returning to that unique and rare quality that Emily possesses in spades. It's just, it was a dream to ask her to be part of this, and we were so lucky that she said yes.
Thank you.
Emily, well, as Anna said, you've inhabited many different and I think very complex roles over the years, and so I'm curious, when you read the script, what was it about the character of Aileen that stood out to you?
My first response to the script was really who are these people? Because this, who wrote this, who made this, who are they? Because I could smell the sea. It felt so authentic and so rooted in something very real and unpleasant, but also it felt like a Greek tragedy at the same time. And I just thought, I want to know who these people are. So we all Zoomed, as you do. And it just led to lots of questions and lots of unfathomable, unanswerable, scary stuff. And it felt like a very long way for me to travel, which is always a thrilling prospect. Then you get to the point at the end when they say cut, and you go, oh, no, it was just one of those processes where you just go, I'm on this train and it's really speeding and it's really powerful, and then suddenly it's over and you think, God, I'm an idiot. I don't know. It's just it was a very powerful thing to be drawn into.
So how did you get answers to some of your questions? What kind of research or preparations did you make for this role?
A lot of conversations with these guys, really. Well, all of us. There were a lot of profoundly difficult moral questions that, that none of the answers are obvious, none of them. But it was very clear to me that they'd all thought about it an awful lot. That sounds just suddenly very English thing to say, an awful lot. But that was part of my journey as well, is, going to Ireland, being an English woman, going into Ireland and being at the heart of a story like this is very privileged. given the history and I listen to the sound of my own voice, and I sound very kind of head-based, nasal English, slightly irritating. I don't know. And the sound of the character is a very long way away from who I am. That was a big journey for me and really scary because everybody else, I mean, this is a fluent Irish speaker, was pretty terrifying.
So, Paul, did you feel your journey was long as well? What were your impressions of the script?
Yeah, it was similar to Emily's in the sense that the minute I read it, I wanted to be in it. It was the kind of script that you read that you feel is politically very clear, or clear in terms of the message that it wants to land upon the audience, I feel like in a kind of non-deliberate way. But ultimately, what is fun from the acting side of it is that the characters felt subterraneous, or like there was a lot beneath the surface in which we could play. And that's kind of the dream, is when you feel like there's a film that is carrying the audience along really in it surely, but the characters are kind of moving like water a little bit, kind of, they can surprise you. And what was the second part of that question, sorry?
What your impressions of the script were, which I think you
Yes, I think
you
that was
touched
my,
on,
they
but-
were my impressions
Yeah.
of the script. Yes.
Well, I'm curious how you found this balance with Brian. He's a character who's obviously charismatic and loved by his family, or some of his family and community, but also there's this obvious danger to him and deceptiveness. I'm curious how you discuss this role, or how you sort of inhabited that.
Yeah, that was kind of the first conversation was probably the most nervous I was about a first conversation, because it's how do you talk to strangers who you really trust their taste, but how do you go, I feel like the way for this film and Brian to work is that we as filmmakers have a degree of sympathy for not what he does, but what motivates him to get to that position, or else it is just like a kind of villainous character. And straight off the bat, Anna and Celia and Fodhla were innately interested in that clash. It's like both things exist in him. He is a son who is loved by his mother, and that also has to be true as the person who does what he does to Sarah. So that innate kind of balance was what scared me, and I was like, this is what I want to do next as a move in my career, and also as a challenge as an actor, because I didn't know if I would be able to do it, or by not being able to do it, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to feel the sympathy that I felt was required to play him, and for that to be interesting to an audience, I think.
Well, Anna and Celia, I'm wondering if you can talk about directing actors, and specifically directing Emily and Paul, because I'm curious if you feel your experience directing actors has evolved since directing the Fits. That was largely with a non-professional cast, but I think what's striking about both of these films is how intensely physical the performances are. I think just gesture and movement go a long way. So I'm curious if you can talk about that a little bit, and Emily and Paul, I'm be interested to hear your impressions on that as well.
Yes, certainly we are evolving, learning, absorbing, growing artists. So we keep learning, but that attention to gesture is how we think about story. So it's kind of our obsession in a way. And one of the really important elements of this film from the very beginning for us was that that the story needed to be in the bodies. Aileen and Brian are very different, but they share a similarity. They're super present tense. They're not heady people. There is a present tense element about them. For Aileen, it's actually her body is 10 steps ahead of her mind. So it's her body that rejects Brian first. You know, he reaches to console her, and that instinct, the body to move away. So that is a kind of subconscious internalization of self. And so we were really interested in how we could put the tension of the scene into the body. And with Brian, so much of it was about bringing Paul into that present tense. You know, in the present tense, there's not judgment, there's not space for judgment, it's simply present tense, there's no before, no after. And so much of that with Brian, there was so much that actually we drew from the fits about working with athletes and dancers, and how breath informs the way you move through space. And so a lot of the work that we did with Paul was about what type of breathing he was doing, and when. And, you know, if you start to breathe in an athletic way, if you do nostril breathing, you know, there's a way to kind of just come into your body, and it's very hard to not be present in it. And so we were workshop with both of them, and that was a lesson that we learned and absorbed from the privilege of working with dancers previously.
I mean, yeah, I think Anna summed it up perfectly. But you know, we also had about 2 weeks of rehearsal, and so like in that time, we had those conversations about body. I'd also say like the face, you know, how much you can do with the face, and there's these beautiful close-ups of Aileen in which she's kind of saying so much without saying anything at all. And then we developed just kind of the shorthand where I think like once we were on set, you know, it only required a word, and they knew exactly where to go in their bodies. And, you know, I think that rehearsal time was valuable in kind of establishing that kind of shorthand.
Emily and Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything about the...
I think we had sort of, it felt to me like the first thing we found in rehearsal was the joy of that relationship. And it was, you know, I think as soon as we started working, there was just, you know, it was a sense of mischief and a sense of fun, and we really lent into that and enjoyed it, and the kind of the light that there is between them. You know, every aspect of this film is really a version of love. You know, love that's true and real, and love that's obsessive and love that's very wrong. You know, it's just sort of finding that emotional territory and the complexity of it and the manipulation in it. And you know, that was a real great, you know, going to work every day to work on that together was really thrilling. You know, when you go on the dance floor and you know you've got somebody who really knows how to do it. It's cool.
Yeah, I can't believe Emily Watson just said that. But it really, that is one of my kind of prevailing memories, is actually outside of the shoot, was those 2 weeks where you have this extraordinary material and then you look across the table and it's Emily Watson doing she is just a master in, I think. So no further point other than that was great.
Well, you know, to carry on blowing the smoke up the proverbial. Yeah, no, Paul was forever asking, you know, what about asking for help, asking for advice, and I would, like, you don't need my help, you don't need my advice, you've got the whole thing in spades right there. So that was thrilling.
Well, I do want to open it up to the audience in a minute, but I have just one more question that I guess I'd like to throw to all of you, really, and that's a question relating to the location of the film, and because I think the setting in this film, conveying its atmosphere and its sounds, is so incredibly important. And so I'm wondering, to what degree did the location, when you finally got there on set, or when you were scouting locations, to what degree did that define or I guess reshape the story in your minds, or how it reshaped how you interpreted your characters?
Is this a down the line situation?
I feel like the where we shot was exceptionally like brutal as a like landscape, and it doesn't really tolerate a kind of soft like approach, which I really enjoyed, and kind of getting, I think the guys mentioned it, just having that long lead in time of 5 or 6 weeks prior to filming, and really letting this space and the country itself inform. It was just perfectly merged in my head of what I wanted it to be, and also how it complemented the script itself.
I think to me, Aileen was more animal than she was rational being, and that felt, that the way that she defends her son is totally instinctual, and that felt that came very much from the place. It's just wild and free in a way that you don't appreciate until you're actually there. And also realizing from what Shane talked about, and when he talked about her backstory and stuff, is that if you read an English story about a fishing village, the main character wants to get away, but this, to her, it was the center of the universe, and a very, very, very powerful place full of love and magic.
Well, I'm from that world. I have very complicated feelings. I mean, one of the areas that I did want to explore when we first set out developing the script was this relationship between landscape and people. And I grew up in a fishing village. My father was a salmon fisherman. My brother is an oyster farmer. Growing up, we were at the mercy of the sea, and sometimes we didn't eat because my dad was unable to get a catch for the day, and I found that to be really difficult at times. I struggled with the whole idea of why stay, and it's a connection that I still struggle with, and it's something that I probably will always explore in the work that I originate. And yeah, so that relationship to landscape and whatnot is very much present in the script. And yeah.
I guess I'll say, just on a practical level, it's exactly as Anna and I had envisioned, which we were very excited by. The fish processing warehouse was a space that we were searching for a very long time, and kind of just happened upon it when we were back here in the States. We traveled to Cary, where Fodhla's from, several times while we were developing the script, and really wanted to find kind of this location that we had envisioned, and couldn't find it in that area. And so when we were back here, we were on Google Earth and just like searching, and we found this fish factory, and it was empty. Fodhla and Shane actually drove up there, I think, the next weekend, and it was empty, and they spoke to the owners and kind of essentially managed to secure it for us, and it just kind of was this serendipitous thing. So I guess just as a practical kind of anecdote about that. But I think when Anna and I were thinking about the role of the environment, of the land in this film, we always wanted it to. We were thinking about it in how it would reflect the interior space of what Aileen is experiencing, and so we wanted to pull from not only kind of the visuals, but the sound of the environment, and really think about how to use that to use all of those elements to tell this story.
When the first time we went to Ireland, we went to Kerry, we went to Fodhla's hometown. And we went out on the oyster bank with her brother. And when you're out there, you know, you oyster farm, as you hopefully have learned, in these tidal bays. And so you go out and you're on the sand, you know, you're on land. And slowly but surely you find yourself in the middle of the ocean. And it's this bizarre, very surreal feeling that you are completely insignificant, small, and that your survival is dependent on the few people around you. And this force, this magical thing, the sea's goodwill in a way. And it's really strange, and it's a very powerful feeling. And that's just something that I think we return to. It's how do we elicit that feeling that of insignificance, where there's this kind of, you know, mythic quality to the story, that texture. That was something we were always chasing, and that first and foremost comes from the sea there.
Thank you all for that. We can open it up to the audience now. We'll take a question right there. There are mics going around, so if you can refrain from asking your question until you get it.
Hi, this movie was beautiful, by the way, but I guess my question for all of you is basically in regards to the ensemble in this cast. It was gorgeous to see every single actor in this film just interact with each other. It was like an elaborate dance, just seeing the line delivery to the actions, especially in the factory with all the women. So I guess my question really is for all of you is, how was it to cultivate this energy between all actors, and like, how real did it feel for you as directors and producer, and how did that help in developing your character for both of you as well?
I think we were blessed with just an incredible and deep cast of, you know, amazing Irish talent. And
Shaheen Baig.
yeah, our casting director, Shaheen Baig, just worked. I mean, she understood what we were building, and we were building something that every moment, whether it's in focus or it's a passing, fleeting glance, if it's a foregrounded gesture, it should be true, and it should be in the tone of our film. And so that buy-in, that quality of work, that ethos was coming, everybody that joined us, and all of our essays, you know, are working Fisher people. And so they were bringing with them their knowledge and their firsthand experience. They were, in a lot of ways, our coaches on movement and authenticity. And yeah, I think it was just that everybody came with that intention of seeking out the truth, you know.
I also think, you know, Paul spoke to what a joy it is to work with the tremendous Emily Watson, and her as kind of like she led us, you know, and I think that, yeah, we're just so lucky to have her kind of be this like guiding energy, this guiding force. And yeah, it was just a pleasure. So thank you.
Oh, you made it very easy. Thank you.
We have a hand way in the back.
Thank you for this wonderful film. I wonder if you could speak to, you mentioned early in the Q&A that you had talked to a number of women in this village or some of the other fishing villages who had experienced assault and how they had been shunned by the community. And one of the things I found really interesting about the film was the relationship between mother and daughter and the generational difference in what they see and don't see. And I'm wondering if when you spoke to these women, whether or post the film or in the course of speaking with them, did you see a shift in the way generations deal with this? And what was the reaction, if any, when people from that community saw the film? And do you anticipate a shift as a result of telling the story? Sorry
you
for
wanna speak to
the
that,
long roundabout question.
One of my objectives is to spark that conversation in Ireland, and that is something we would like to achieve soon. Haven't yet had the opportunity. So to be honest, I haven't yet had those conversations yet because you guys are the first, really, bar Can, to see our film, and so I can't really elaborate more for you. I'm sorry to say, but I really do hope it sparks a conversation, and I really do hope certain people will see this film and think more on the culture that does currently exist in Ireland. There is a real problem at home, you know. 1 in 5 women, according to a survey that was done in 2020, 1 in 5 women are raped in Ireland. 1 in 2 throughout their lifetime will experience some form of sexual violence. That's shocking to me, and yeah, I do hope change will happen fast.
I had a
Well-
conversation, sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
Well, I was gonna, I don't know who is, wait, let's go. I was gonna talk about, you asked about generational shifts. And the character Erin, played by the brilliant Toni O'Rourke. You know, we were very adamant about putting different versions of how to survive, how to live on screen. And Sarah, you know, is this courageous, powerful force, and she chooses to leave. She's in fact very reluctant to, but must leave in order to survive. And Erin sees a possibility to stay and change things. And I think so much about Erin, and in reflection with the question that Fodhla poses, this conflict of staying or leaving, and can you change something and exist and be true to yourself. And Erin chooses to stay and to raise a son here in this town. And for me, that is a different act of courage, and it was very important to talk and to show what the next generation is doing. And there are a lot of ways to affect change, and some of them are just what you can manage yourself. How to survive is a complicated question. How to just exist and be, that is enough. That's incredibly courageous. But we wanted to show different ways that the next generation is challenging these norms, and not just accepting things as they have been.
I mean, I think this speaks really to the heart of the film. I think they are an incredibly tight community that see themselves as having a very strong moral compass. You know, they'll all go to mass and do all the religious festivals, and yet Brian and Aileen will never have had a conversation about consent, because it's just not in the canon, it's not in the teaching, it's not in the conversation, it's not in the vocabulary of the church, really. I mean, I'm sure it is somewhere, but in terms of, you know, being a good person, you can absolve yourself, you know, once a week. And, you know, Aileen probably thinks of herself as a very good person, but she lives this kind of slightly witchcrafty life where she thinks, you know, and during the film, she thinks she's manifested her son through the power of her prayer. And yet she hasn't given him one of the fundamental building blocks of life, which is respect. You know, it's a big black hole in the middle of it all.
Yep, I see a hand right there.
Hello. Firstly, just want to congratulate you all on a really authentic and important story. My question was, I thought it was a really interesting choice to not include a vivid graphic scene in which the incident happened between Brian and Sarah, and how much of a conscious decision it was to cut from the night before at the pub to the next morning in terms of the story. Yeah, just how much of a decision that was and why you chose to make that decision.
We always knew from the very beginning that we wouldn't show that violent act on screen. And so, yeah, it was always our intention. And as Anna was saying earlier about kind of like our focus on the body, you know, this really is like an examination about how trauma reverberates through the body. And so kind of the like answer, I guess, to the scene before kind of what happens is Sarah's collapse, you know, and that's our focus. What are kind of like the psychological and physical effects on her body from that trauma? So yeah, that was always kind of the initial intention.
Yeah, it's embedded in the DNA of this film that this is not a procedural. This is not a whodunit. We are not laying evidence, and to render that scene on screen would be to ask our audience to interrogate those events. And for us as filmmakers, Sarah's word is enough.
I'm sorry to say we have to wrap it up, but thank you all so much for sharing this film and your time with us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. And thank you